Well, welcome to a chat with Jeff and Jon. If you have a better name than that, let us know. This is the first time that we're using a StreamYard. This is the first time we've been using that, and so we might be having some issues along as we try to figure this all out. And as people get in, I'm getting an echo, which might mean I need to get some headphones. And we're joined by Carl Smethurst, who is from SWBA. I'm still working out that, but look how beautiful that looks.
Oh, it's Carl, really lovely.
Below you.
Right. Well done.
Yes. So Carl, could you introduce yourself, who you are and what you do?
Great. So my name is Carl Smethurst, and I'm a regional minister in the Southwest Baptist Association. My particular role is mission. So that's a joy as well as a challenge. It involves things like church planting and pioneers, encouraging existing churches and engaging with their communities. And the truth be told is that at the moment, there's a certain amount of the activities that I'd normally be doing, which I can't do anymore. So what we're doing is trying to fill in the gaps, keeping contact with our churches via Zoom mainly, and also to engage through social media via our Facebook and Instagram and Twitter feeds, but also through our through our website. So as most associations have got what is being termed the Corona page, so have we at the moment. It's a great pleasure to be with you guys today.
Right. Well, yeah, so we've started this thing kind of a couple weeks ago, not just trying to see how we could engage with people in our church while not being able to meet face to face. And Jon and I had the idea of exploring different themes that we'd like to have more time to talk with people, but generally in the course of life when people are working, we don't tend to be able to have deep conversations about the things that we think are really important. And one of the things that we've been looking at Wesley Baptist Church is changing the way that we do membership. And the church has been working on this before I arrived in the summer. But when I arrived and heard the plans, it reminded me of what you had done, Carl, in Watch It. Before we get to that, Jon, if you could maybe tell us a little bit about the backstory of how you came to see how things should maybe change in the life of Wesley.
Okay, so yeah, we have a traditional way of doing church membership. That is that we have a list of people. All of those people at one stage or another have had their name brought to a church members meeting, and they remain on that membership list, and we review it as a leadership, as trustees now. We review that leadership. And when you arrive at a church, and I arrived a few years ago, although I know the church really well, there are a large number of people on there who no longer attend for one reason or another, some of whom are connected to families within the church. And this posed a bit of a problem because you want, I think, your membership to reflect those that are active in the life of the church. But I think in the past, there have been attempts to remove people from membership, and that hasn't always gone down very well, especially if they were connected to church families. And as always, it's the way that it's done as opposed to the actual desire that causes an issue. And the church here did a few years ago try to do something called covenant membership, where I think the way it worked was once a year, there would be a covenant Sunday and everybody would turn up and express their desire to remain in membership and to covenant with God and each other. But that caused some issues because I think they almost said if you weren't there on the day, unless you had a really good reason, then you couldn't be a covenant member. So some people weren't confused about whether they were members or not. So I've inherited a situation where that covenant membership is not really working anymore, but I still have probably 15 to 20 folks on the membership who, let's say, will be sensitive, and those that come to Wesley would probably be able to, they've been around long enough to know who are those people. And at the same time, we want to encourage new folks, of which we've got many, to understand what membership's about. So there are two things, and I'll review them really quickly and then hand back to you, Jeff. the first thing is that we are rewriting a kind of welcome to Wesley presentation, which would take people through what kind of church we are, what our values are, how you get things done, explains membership, and really kind of goes into the detail of what we think membership looks like, so that everybody that comes has a much better understanding. And we want to say that you cannot become a member of the church unless you've been through that presentation, that course, as it were. And then the second thing which I want to do is to have at some stage every year a moment when everybody is invited to once again affirm their membership. And we have a good database system. We've got everybody on our church suite. We can email everyone, but we thought that we could do that through an email, through home groups, through Sunday services, to say to everyone, hey, we've got this month, maybe October, November time, where we are saying, look, the new year is coming. We've got a new way, a new opportunity next year. If you want to affirm your membership and remain in membership, please do so. And you can do that with a text or an email or a letter or in person or via your home group. And then we might have a Sunday where we express that membership's important, but that wouldn't necessarily be about people affirming on that day. And that as part of that, there would be some, I suppose, qualifications for membership, that you are there 50% of the time, that you are committed to the vision, that you attend regularly, that you're part of a home group, and then some things which cover the whole kind of area of if you're working overseas or if you are, unable to come out because you are housebound. So you have to have good reason, and we've listed those reasons so that every year we would have a membership which reflects those who are committed to the vision of the church, and that it would give people the opportunity to opt out without that need to come to a church members meeting and say, so-and-so has been removed or so-and-so has resigned. And that's the kind of thing that we're thinking through.
All right. So Carl, you changed the way that you did membership when you were at Watch It, before you were the regional minister in the Southwest. Can you talk me through that process, why you changed things, what you changed things to?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, first, it's worth me saying I'm really not an angry man about this particular subject. I think it's important. Don't get me wrong, but this is not one of the things that exercises me to the point of losing sleep. I'm not convinced by changing our system of membership that will open the floodgates of heaven and see revival on our shores. That said, I do think that there's a responsibility for all of us to engage in thinking about the systems, particularly that we've inherited in every generation, to try and understand why we have them, and if necessary, to bring challenge that can be theoretical. It might mean that things stay the same, but if necessary, also bring about some practical change. I ended up writing an article about this, which I'll put in the comments box on Facebook and on YouTube, which, if you like, is a condensed version of the thoughts. But what happened at Watch It Baptist Church in West Somerset was, as I arrived as minister, the previous minister who'd retired, I discovered, had been working through the church constitution with the church and had got to the section on membership and then rather ungraciously had retired, leaving that to the next minister to try and engage with. Good move. As I arrived with my various theoretical back of brain questions about how we relate to each other and how we belong in a local church, it suddenly became a burning issue in the life of that church. It was apparent that there were some in the church who had been frustrated at not being able to be part of the discerning process for my call. They've been a part of the church for many years, involved in the life of Sunday school and various other different aspects in the life of the church. But because, for whatever reason, they weren't a member, they weren't able to be involved in discerning together at my call. And equally, I discovered that a wonderful lady, clearly with a powerful gift of discernment, had rocked up at the members' meeting and voted for me, having never met me, never heard me, and having never attended the church for almost a decade. But she was still on the membership roll, and so was part of that process. God bless her. I'm certainly not complaining. I was called to the church. But there was just certain challenges, and most of those were about process. Whereas I think probably there was more questions for me about the theology of belonging to the local church, and about our history ecclesiologically as well, how we've got to the point that we've got. So the broad direction of travel was based on an observation that whether through neglect or necessity or desire, membership had become primarily an institutional function in the life of the charity. And it was, don't hear me wrong, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be charities or anything like that, or that we should ignore charity law. Please don't hear me wrong. What I am saying is that had become the focus in the life of the church. The big question is, are we corporate, right? Rather than the central question being, what's the Spirit communicating to us through his church on this particular issue, all down to meeting the needs of a constitution. So what my desire was to re-engage this whole thing about membership with relationship. And the term covenant got used because of the covenants that we have as individuals with God, and that sense of belonging based within that covenant to a local expression of the gathered church, and that being part of our fundamental ecclesiology. So that's where we started. Various examples of people that came to faith who I tried to explain this to. One quickly, a lovely lady called Lindsay, who hadn't been to church for donkey's years, asked how to get more involved. So I explained to her how we did membership, and she repeated back what she thought she'd heard. She said, so let me get this right. You send some of the bosses to my house to interview me, and then they write a report about me and then read it out at that meeting that I'm not allowed to go to. And then you all vote on whether to let me join the club. And if you vote yes, then you give me some strange handshake at that service where we pretend to drink blood, she said, having had a background, her mum in Catholicism, and her dad was the Grand Master of the local Freemasonry lodge. And so clearly her points of reference were a bit skewed, but that was her perspective on process. As far as she was concerned, she was part of the local church. She loved Jesus. She'd been baptized, was part of the life of the church. What's wrong with that? And suddenly we layered all this stuff on her, which seemed a little bit weird.
So after the end of the process, what did membership look like at Watch It?
So it became eventually part of the calendar of the year for the church. After Christmas, which I guess is historically a point where we get a lot of extra folks into our churches over the Christmas period, and we do everything we can to make them feel welcome in January. Typically, we'll get some that will then start coming to church in January. So quite soon after Christmas time, we'd have a newcomers lunch. Lots of churches do that at the beginning of the year to welcome those folks that were exploring faith, those who might have had faith have come back to Christ. And following that initial very informal welcome meal, we ran a course. We changed the terminology from membership to partnership. Various reasons for that. I'm not sure there's a particular right or wrong term to use. Most words are loaded one way or another. But we made that partly to say, look, we're viewing this differently now. And so our partnership course included things such as what is faith? A personal response of faith, the invitation for people to make personal response of faith. What's baptism about? The invitation for people to be baptized. What are the vision and values of this particular local church? What do we stand for? And also at the beginnings of and what might God want you to do to serve his church and to serve the community in this place. So that was a course that led up towards Easter. Easter, if we hadn't had one before, was always a baptismal service. So we'd baptize those who'd come to faith on Easter Sunday morning. And as part of that process, we'd then work with the church to every year talk about what it means to be part of the life of this church, to belong to this local church. And we talk about our relationship with Jesus, our relationship with each other, our relationship with those in our local communities not yet of faith, and our relationship with God's mission in the world at large, leading up to Pentecost. And on Pentecost Sunday, we'd have what we called a Covenant Sunday, which in many ways was reaffirming for those that had been part of the church already their covenant with Jesus. That hadn't stopped and started. It was a continuous covenant, but they were wanting to reaffirm that sense of relationship, and particularly within that particular local church for the next year. And so that was an incredible service. It was great because it was Pentecost, but recognizing the nature of relationship in the local church coming out of the first Pentecost. We made those kind of connections and joined the dots for folks.
So how did you deal with people coming into membership, as it were, out of that calendar year? And then how did you remove people if you needed?
In terms of those that came to faith later in the year and were baptized through the year, we normally had more than one baptismal service in a year. We basically would welcome them, and there was, if you like, covenant pledges, I guess, for want of a better word, which it might be helpful to read them out. So we would do this a couple of times a year, and people that joined the church and wanted to be part of the life of the church through the year would do this on a Sunday. These were things that we'd say at the covenant service, but we'd also say them through the year as required as well. The first was committing to Jesus. So we speak to God, responding to your love for me. I commit my life to you. You are my Lord. You are my Savior. You are my example. Please help me to become more like you. And the second was committing to the people of this church, recognizing that God wants us to live out our lives of faith together and to encourage each other to become more like Jesus. I commit to serving this church community. Please disciple me as I open my life to you. You are my community for discipleship, mission, worship, and life in this coming year. I will live out the vision and values of this church in partnership with you. The third was relating to those in our local community not yet of faith. Joining in with God's loving mission and going, I commit to sharing God's love with you in my attitudes, in my actions, and in my words. I will be good news in relationship with you. And then the fourth, recognizing that we're part of the global church. Recognizing your generous blessing in my life, I commit to bless those beyond this local church as they seek to share your love with others. Within this family of churches and beyond, I will support your mission in the world. So those, if you like, four things that we'd ask people to say publicly at the covenant service, people would affirm those things through the year and then to membership. In my time, we didn't need to remove anyone from membership, but constitutionally that would be done in the way that it would have previously. So there would have to be that brought to a church meeting. Church meetings, of course, still happened, and those who were partnering together would hear that and discern whether or not that person should continue on the list. Causing more angst were those who maybe had previously been part of the life of the church, who, because they were now no longer part of the life of the church, then were removed from the membership role, from the partners role, and that, particularly for friends or relatives, was often a painful thing. So the first thing was that was a pastoral exercise. If someone wasn't around, the question is asked why. Have they disappeared? Have they slipped through the cracks? That was a job for me. And actually the church secretary would bang on my door and say, at points through the year, we've not seen so-and-so, and they have been committed to the life of the church. Can you go and find out what's happened? And so that was the first, because it's about relationship. So if there's an issue with a relationship, we wanted it recognized and restored. If for whatever reason that person did not want to come back, it could be for all kinds of reasons. They'd moved out the area. Of course, that's changed since Baptist membership was set up. People used to live in the same community for generations, and now we're far more transient than we used to be. So that was typically the reason. Or they'd gone to a different church, and so we blessed them and we'd say, go with God and continue your journey of discipleship elsewhere, but you're no longer a part of this church.
Sorry, can I just jump in one more? So when somebody was coming into the membership or partnership with the church, they weren't there was nobody to ratify that. That was purely down to them to say, I can now affirm these statements and I want to do that. And they would say to you or another minister leader, I would like to become part of it. There was no interview as such, and their name didn't go to the church members.
There was no interview as such, but typically those people were in relationship in the life of the church. That was, so the partnership was a reflection of relationship. So they'd been around.
Someone affirms that, like a small group leader or ministry.
In fact, actually, the church meeting affirmed it. So those people who were new to the life of the church, who become a partner for the first time, their names effectively, you use the term ratify, by the gathered church, the church meeting, and so that was where that process happened. But typically, by that stage, people had got to know those who were new to the life of the church.
So, I'll shut up in a minute, Jeff. Well. What do you think about this idea that we've got, or I've got, about having a yearly kind of opt-in moment? Do you think that that's too much, or that's about right, or every now and again? Because what I wanted to avoid was this, and I recognise the pastoral responsibility, was to avoid this kind of, you've not been coming for 6 months, we're going to remove you. I would rather them say, well, I'm just not going to sign up again. And yes, there's a pastoral conversation to be had. But also, if someone was going to sign up to affirm membership, but they don't actually fulfill the criteria, then it enables us to actually say, hey, you've said you want to be a continued member in the life of the church, but actually we haven't seen you for 2 years. So how do those two things fit together? So I wouldn't want to do any of it without some kind of pastoral consideration. But this idea that every year there would be a fresh opportunity for people to affirm that they are covenant membership of the life of the church. Do you think that's a good idea, or would you not put it in those terms?
It's certainly how we did it in Watch It, and how other churches have done that as well. I think, interestingly, for just purely from a theological perspective, to tease out the reaffirming, I think that's an important word, the reaffirming of a previous covenant that's been made, if you see what I mean. So I'm still a firm believer in baptism being linked with membership of the Church of Christ. There's something about that covenant being set in place between human beings and Almighty God at that particular point in time, at that sacramental moment. So the annual thing was very much, for those who were part of the life of the church, a reaffirmation of those baptismal vows, so to speak, a reaffirmation of that commitment to Jesus. The reason I think it's helpful to do it annually is because of a change in society. So we are far more transient than we used to be. And part of what I think was causing people to not want to commit to the local church was because they weren't sure how long they were going to be around for. There was always this, I might be around for a year, or I might be around for 5 years, or I might be gone in 6 months. So there's no point. There is a point. Ecclesiologically and theologically, there is a definite something spiritual. This isn't an institutional activity. This is a spiritual thing belonging to the Church of Christ, the local expression of the Church of Christ. So you need to give opportunity regularly for that to happen, and to include those who think they might only be around for a year, so that's where the doing it every year thing came from. It was neat in that we could link it with Pentecost. I know other streams of churches, the Methodists have been doing covenant services forevermore, and they do it on the first Sunday in January typically. And boy, oh boy, is that covenant liturgy full on. It's beautiful and wonderful and challenging, and so this is not hardly a new idea. We haven't come up with this, but it's how regularly it happens, and I think annually it's good. It was a good reminder. What happens occasionally in local churches is that the previous people who have been involved fall out with the church for a little bit. I'm pretty sure it doesn't happen at Wesley Baptist Church, but I am aware that happens in other Baptist churches, and it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that people may just hold a grudge a little bit, if you see what I mean. They'll use their involvement in the life of the local church, or lack thereof, almost as a weapon. I don't like what you've done. I don't like this decision that I've made, so I'm taking my toys. And it's never quite like that, you understand. But there's an element of people. That's no good. That's nothing to do with the relationship in the family of God. And so actually coming up to a covenant service, those people who I was aware were unsettled, had become aware were unsettled in the life of the church. It gave opportunity pastorally to go and chat with them and to talk those things through, to try, if there was broken relationship, to see it reconciled, rather than to allow some of those things to rumble under the surface, sometimes for years. So yeah, I think doing it annually it was a prompt to a lot of those things happening.
Did you find it changed the way that the church was in reality, or was it just some window dressing that changed a constitutional thing? Did you feel it had any effect on the relationships that were already there, or help relationship deepen, or the mission of the church?
Certainly, when we introduced this into the church, it was a relatively small church. I mean, even by the time that I moved on, it was only just over 100 or so in size. So as a smaller church, there was quite strong relationships anyway, as there typically is in a smaller church. We'd have struggled to make them any deeper than they already were. In many ways, the partnership thing and the covenant service was a reflection of what was already happening around of us when it comes to relationships. But certainly, I think in terms of the vision and values of the church, people are far more engaged in discerning together, God, what are you asking us? How are you asking us to live and to be a witness in this particular community? What are our values? What is the vision that you've put before us for this coming period of time? And the affirming of that, the knowledge of that, and the affirming of that was definitely something that was strengthened as a result of doing this.
You have any other questions, John, about that topic?
No, I mean, I love the 4 affirmations. I thought they were excellent, and they are akin to where we've got to. So our process would be that we would, send out the affirmations, as it were, to everyone, and to say, look, if you are already an existing member, then we'd love you to affirm these. And this gives you the opportunity to say, actually, I don't want to be part of this anymore. And that's, God bless you, as you say. But it also creates the opportunity for those who are not yet members but would like to become members to say, yeah, I can affirm those. And at that point, they would say, I want to affirm those things. And at that point, I think we would then do a report and take something to the church members meeting, so that we would actually give the church members meeting information about them, tell something of their story, and it would be in the agenda rather than as part of a presentation at the meeting, because we find sometimes that can go on a bit. So there will be a whole list of people who are saying, here are, a dozen people who want to affirm the vision, the values, and the membership that we have put out there. And we would like to vouch for them, to say that we believe this is right. They're part of this home group. They're part of this ministry group. The ministers and another trustee can say, look, we vouch for them. So we wouldn't necessarily have to bring a report to that local church members meeting, but we would be able to affirm it. And then at a suitable time, as you've said, we would then say, right, these people have signed up, as it were. Now we want to do something publicly to welcome them, celebrate that they're part of us, and they will then declare with us those values. I think that would be an excellent way forward, and it reminds the existing church members on a regular basis of what that means. So I think it's kind of helpful, and it kind of affirms the thinking that I have. I know that it's painful, but what I wanted to do was to create the opportunity for those who are existing members but no longer attending to find it an easy way to say, well, I'm not going to be thrown out. I'm choosing not to be part of this anymore. And I thought that was helpful. The only other, I suppose, thing in the back of my mind, and I wrote it down, I've been writing some notes as we've been chatting and listening, is those that have come from other churches where they've experienced pain, who find membership therefore a kind of, they're definitely resistant to it. And I get that. I've sat down with some of them and I've heard their stories. And I've got folks in the life of the church at Wesley who have been around since I've been around, who have never committed to membership. And it's how we deal with those folks. And I've also got some folks who may be in the family home with others who are not quite in the same place as them. They're Christians, but they're not in the same place in their understanding of membership. And they feel they can't become members because they want to come with other members of their family. And I'm not sure there's an easy answer to that. I trust some people and allow them into ministry roles, even though they're not members, because I know their heart. And I know that the stumbling block is part of the pain that they've experienced in the past. And they may be people that are giving and serving and turning up and getting involved. So all the way along, that's been in the back of my mind, is perhaps this is a fresh opportunity to enable folks who've experienced difficulty in membership, and some of them will be watching this and watching a recording, to actually say that we want to welcome you into something new, something slightly different, something more relational, and something where we regularly affirm what it means to be the gathered church and making decisions together. I mean, this is a good church. There's lots of really great things about it. And we, you know, membership is, I don't know, 215, 220, something like that. But, you know, we're seeing regularly over 300 people on Sundays and Wednesdays. So we could see our membership rise by 25, 30 people in the next 12 months. Through new Christians and through people coming from other churches. So that relational stuff is hard, as you've said, because in a smaller church, people find it easy to get together. So I'm not wanting membership to be an institutional thing. I want it to be a relational as much as it can be in a large church. And often the decisions that we make, I would say 85% of the decisions that are made by me and Jeff and the trustees. And only the really big stuff comes to the members. And we're learning what that means in terms of a large church and driving forward with those ideas. So yeah, it's really helpful to hear your reflections. I don't think I have any more questions, but
it might just be worth me saying that as far as those four kind of statements that we make at the Covenant service are in the article that you've got the link for. But we noticed initially an increase of about 20% in those that became partners of the church when we did this. And the reason was because we started using the language of relationship rather than institution for a number of reasons. I've been hurt by the church institution in the past. I heard I'm not a Baptist was a really common one. Define what is a Baptist would be one question to ask. But actually, it wasn't really about that. It wasn't whether you kind of saw yourself as an Anglican, Pentecostal, Brethren, or a Baptist. It was, are you committed to Jesus? And are you committed to these people in this local church? And are you committed to the mission of this church? And are you committed to the global mission of God? If you are, if it's about a committed relationship, then you're part of this church as much as I am.
Yeah.
And so that's how we're defining this partnership, this membership, and that increased the membership initially by about 20% because suddenly it wasn't about becoming a Baptist. It was a reflection of relationship, and that made the difference.
Yeah, I guess for me, maybe more than you two, but maybe not. I like being a Baptist. I'm spend a lot of my time thinking about Baptist things and writing about Baptist things, and just it might be helpful. Maybe this is where we should have started. Is what does it mean to be a Baptist? Because I think a lot of this conversation has to do with what it means to be a Baptist. We like baptism, it's in our name, but probably more fundamentally to that is the idea that we really believe in the local church, that we believe as Christians we belong to the body of Christ, the worldwide body of Christ, those who profess faith in Jesus Christ. But that is concreted, made reality in a local church setting. And that's why membership is important. It's not because we can have some sort of institution, but that this particular people are a representative of the body of Christ in a particular locality and location. I was going to ask you a question. We kind of started to allude to it, but what do you tell people? Because most churches have this. People saying, I don't really want to be a member because X, Y, Z. So you found, Carl, that the way of doing membership in your way and highlighting the language of relationality saw a difference?
Certainly it did for me. Yeah, I mean, it's not just a Baptist thing, is it? I mean, Jesus drew around himself a community of people who belonged, who were in relationship with him, and so knew God through the person of Christ, and who knew each other, who were part of the mission of Christ in the world. Without wanting to kind of in any way be disparaging about other streams of the Christian church, I think who we are as Baptists affirms that sense not of a scattered community, but of a gathered community of those seeking to follow Jesus and encourage each other in their faith. We don't define membership, therefore, by an electoral roll or a parish system, for example. We define it by those who are committed to Jesus, committed to each other, and committed to the mission of God in the local area, the local community. So I think actually, in many ways, to talk in those terms then becomes embracing, if you see what I mean. There's an open membership system that goes along with this viewpoint, rather than it being a closed membership. But you would be surprised. I'm sure you as ministers aren't that surprised. But I'd have people that are moving to the area rock up at the church on the Sunday with a baptismal certificate from 1953 to prove they were a Baptist, so that they could have communion with us. And so that they could be considered for membership in the local church. Something about an institution, almost a little bit of a club type of a thing. It's like, well, it's not like, but it's a little bit like showing your caravan club membership card so you can go to that particular caravan site or something. It's weird, and it doesn't fit missionally with the world today.
I think there's something too about power, though, as well. That when I talk about membership to folks, we talk about the whole discerning the body of Christ together, discerning the mind of Christ together as a people. And that, although ministers are called to a role and have an element of authority given the responsibility they have, the issue of power about releasing that and enabling others. I've had people say to me when they've come from another church how they sense that I'm okay with decisions not going my way. So I might propose something, an idea, or I might bring something to the church members, and the church members might say, no, actually, we don't think that's right. And I've had people say to me that they've come from other churches where the minister's kind of taken that personally, and it was his idea or her idea, and the church haven't embraced it. And I thoroughly believe in the church members meeting as a place where decisions are made. And sometimes that even means that what I think isn't what the Lord thinks. And I think that the church meeting and membership enables the gathered people of God to make decisions which might disagree with where I'm at a particular time. And the folks that have come from other churches have said they find that refreshing. And I've walked away sometimes from a church members meeting feeling a little bit, that didn't go as well as I thought. But actually God's will was done. So I think that membership works when people understand that it is relational, that they have responsibility. But I think it also works when minister or leaders actually say, when I come to this meeting, yes, I'm chairing or leading or speaking, but I am discerning the mind of Christ with these people as well. And it's not a kind of, I've come with my clenched fist, this is what I believe is right. I admit there have been moments where I felt like that, but I think I've tried in all the churches that I've led to ensure that I'm listening to what the Lord is saying, and even if that means that I may have got it wrong. So it has to be relational, but it also has to be about releasing any sense of power that you might have as a leader within the life of the local church. And that's why one of the reasons I'm a Baptist, because I think it works, but it works best when there is trust between ministers, leaders and members, but where the ministers actually say, at this moment, I enter into common ground with each other. And I don't think that was taught to me when I was in Bible college back in the 90s. I don't think it was something that was impressed upon me in my studies of Baptist life and Baptist church history and Baptist principles. And I think it's something that I've certainly learned more so in the last 10 years than in the previous 15 of ministry, that I have to release any sense of authority that I might have because of my role. And that's a battle. You know, I wouldn't say that I just find it easy, because my personality is, as you probably picked up, quite dominant. I'm the first to speak, first to have an opinion. I'm a quick thinker. Poor old Jeff, he's got quite used to it, I think. But it's a personal battle, but it's a theological principle that I think I want to hold on to. Does that make sense to you two? Jeff, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think, I mean, we've talked about this a few times. I think the humility of a minister going into a meeting is really important. And because there is a sense of authority that comes with us, when we speak in a church meeting, it carries more authority than other people. And therefore, we need to be very careful about that. At my previous church in Oakhampton, I think my proudest moment, we were discussing something to do with money and grants. And if something came to a vote, I think if it went to this vote, it would probably been 74 and 30 against. And those people who are in favor said, no, us getting our way at this point is not worth upsetting the 30% in this. And so we will just go with the 30%. It was nice because I was in the 30%. But I just thought it was such grace in this church meeting that there was a real sense that we are in this together. We are genuinely trying to discern the mind of Christ. We're not trying to get just our way. And this is about us moving together in the same direction as a body of Christ. And I think because it is democratic in a way that there is votes, it can easily very slip into a adversarial way, like Parliament, where you have people against each other. We're all trying to get in the right direction. We have different opinions of where that goes, but we really do trust not just the minister, but the rest of the members that, one, we love Jesus, and that's the thing which unites us. And because we love Jesus, we're trying to find a way to express that in worship, in mission, in whatever. And so for me, the church meeting, the members, those who the body have discerned, we're in this together because of Jesus. We're going in the same direction. And if they disagree, it's not because they don't love Jesus, but because they see something and understand something differently than I do. And I need to listen to that. They might be wrong, but I still need to listen to it. And that's why I'm always keen to differentiate Baptist congregationalism from democracy. Yes, we have a vote, but our vote is not a tool of power and control, but of a way to try to discern the mind of Christ and hold people to account, especially leaders.
I guess that's when Jesus was talking about this is how they will know that you're my disciples, it's because actually it's to do with the love for each other that always aces the need to be right. That example that you gave is a great example of that being the case. Which is why it's not a democracy. because love always aces everything else. The desire for unity, the desire for love aces everything else, which means that a 70-30 vote goes the way of the 30 for the sake of maintaining unity, because the only reason that can happen is because of loving relationship with Jesus and with each other.
Good. Cool. Good stuff. Thank you.
So Carl, as a regional minister, your role is slightly different now because of the virus than other things. But I mean, your particular role is in mission. And when I was in the Southwest, you came on a handful of occasions to help us as a church get our head around mission. I mean, you're engaging in so many different contexts in the Southwest. How's the church down there grappling with mission in a way that's really in a way that excites you?
I mean, at this particular point in time, notwithstanding that actually it's an incredibly painful time for a whole load of people in our churches. The Southwest is maybe not been affected quite as much as other parts of the country by this virus, but in terms of the lockdown, of course, it's much the same. Fundamental to the mission of every church is what is often termed a process of contextualization, or missional listening is the phrase that pays at the moment. We live in a world at the moment where we've never experienced it before. It's new land. It's a new society, a new world. So actually, the skills, the processes of missional listening, of discerning where God is at work and how he's calling us to join him in his mission at this point in time is something that the church has been forced to do. And some churches do this all the time and are really good at it. And some churches are being forced to do it for the first time in a very long time. So from a missional point of view, I think that we're learning a huge amount within the present landscape when it comes down to what God's doing. The kingdom of God didn't get postponed like pretty much everything else has. The mission of God has not been cancelled like most other things have. The question is so what is God calling us to join him in his mission at this point in time to see his kingdom built, not because he needs us, but because actually it's a huge privilege of the Christian church to be involved in the mission of God. He wants us to be involved in his mission. So what does that look like? And I'll be honest with you, I've seen some of the most encouraging examples from some of our smallest churches. The bigger ones tend to have the facilities to be able to live stream, for example. So the knee-jerk reaction of a lot at the moment has been, how do we do what we normally do, but online? What licenses do we need to buy in order to play this particular song? What software do we need to get a subscription to be able to broadcast things? Not an issue with that whatsoever at all. Those that have the resource and the skills to do it are doing that. But some of our smaller churches, it wouldn't matter if anyone did have the skills. There's no one in the church that we've got parts in the Southwest that have hardly got the internet, let alone the skills to work it. So actually, fundamentally, they're beginning to ask the question, God, how is it that you want us to disciple each other at the moment? What are the fundamentally important things about following you, Jesus, and being part of your mission at this point in time? We can't just keep doing what we were doing before, but online. We haven't got the skills, and no one would watch even if we did. So what are we doing? And so schemes where churches are engaged with people in their community, maybe for the first time, telephoning them for half an hour once a week and having a chat with them. We were chatting to one of our ministers yesterday who was talking about calling up church members, and it was their partner that answered the phone. She's never really spoken to their partners before, but she'd had half-hour chats with the partners of these people who were members of her church. There's just all of these little things that are happening. Putting out service outlines or study outlines and posting them to people, and then them sat around the house where other members of the family are also looking at them. there's huge encouragements, I think, in the having to think differently at the moment, and to contextualize. The gospel's not changed, but how we present it at this point in time clearly has. And there's a lot to be encouraged by in that. I'm just about to do another little reflection. You can check out our videos.
Yes.
And I've got one that's brewing. There's the notes. So that'll be filmed this afternoon for Saturday.
Excellent.
Yes. And where can people find those? Your reflections?
So if you want the video reflections, then probably the easiest place to go to is vimeo.com/SWBA, Southwest Baptist Association, vimeo.com/SWBA, and you'll see our diaries that various of us have done, and our prayer vigils and other reflections that we've done, plus a pile of other stuff. So do that, or our website is swbaptist.org.uk. And /coronavirus takes you to our corona page, as it's become known.
John, you have any kind of questions?
No. I'm just thinking about time now, because we've been on for about 50 minutes.
Yeah.
Our Facebook started at about 30 and it's gone down to 15. So I reckon we're boring people now.
Well, I've enjoyed it, even if they're boring.
No, that's good. Yeah.
Yes.
So hi guys, it's been great to chat. I'll be praying for you over this next year, and especially at the moment. But as you think about belonging in a local church, after mission, this is the thing that most people ask me about the country over. So it's clearly on the heart of a whole bunch of people at the moment in Baptist churches to figure out what belonging looks like amongst them.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, I mean, John and I, we've been enjoying doing this. I don't know. Whether this continues beyond coronavirus, we kind of enjoy it, so we hope it does. So if you're watching, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hopefully we'll get better at it and maybe bore people less. Barring that, we're going to be enjoying ourselves. So
get a better guest. You guys have got some excellent guests over the next couple of weeks coming up, so much better than this one.
No, it's great. So in a few hours, we're interviewing Helen Painter, who is the newly appointed Old Testament tutor at Bristol Baptist College. That's going to be released in a couple weeks. Next week, we're doing a live stream with Carl Beach from CVM, so Christian Vision for Men. We have lots of people who from our church go to the gathering. I think you've gone to, Carl, is that right?
I have, yeah. Nice bit of axe throwing and barbecue food.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's been cancelled this year, but it's something that I'm sure will continue. It's been a big blessing to men and helping them re-engage with faith. And if people have ideas for guests who they think would be interesting to talk to, put them in the comments, and we'll see what we can do. Great. Well, thank you so much, Carl, for your time.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you, guys. Bless you.
Have a good rest of the day. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye for now, mate.